How do you transform your biggest traumas to become your biggest launching pads? In this episode, my amazing client, Lottie Lilibet, talks about how the suicide of her brother and cousin changed the course of her life. Lottie isn't just a mental health and wellness practitioner, she's also one of the most gifted mental health professionals I've ever encountered. But her process to get here was messy. So if you find yourself in the heaviness of the mess today, please give yourself the gift of Lottie's inspirational words. Obviously, this episode does discuss suicide, so please honor your body if it tells you it needs a break, as it's a very heavy topic. But Lottie's story is unquestionably one of hope, and I know she will inspire and give great tools to not only help you get through this messy middle, but to use the messy middle to create the life of thriving and impact you know you deserve. Check it out. Welcome to the Humble Warrior Podcast, you guys. I'm your host, Alani Bankhead, and today's really special because I have the incredible Lotte Lilibet on the podcast with me. Lottie is a psychotherapist and the self-esteem queen who works with performers and people suffering with self-esteem issues to step into the highest version of themselves. You guys don't even know the treat that it's going to be today because I've had the privilege of working with Lottie for quite a bit of time. She is such an incredible badass and just shines so much light. I know you are going to be inspired by her story. She inspires me. And we're going to talk about all the things that it takes, all the messiness and the joy and that we need to get to live our very best lives. Because Lottie is a beautiful example of what it takes to be courageous and step out on a literal and figurative stage to live your biggest life. So welcome. Thank you so much for being on the podcast, Lottie.
Thank you so much for having me. It's nice. It's good that we've got here.
Yes, it is. Speaking of getting here, we need to talk about this. How did you get here? Like, how did you get to where you are professionally and personally? You have a couple of businesses, you're changing people's lives. We were listening to testimonials before we hit record. Like, you literally change people's lives. How did you get to this place?
I think it started with changing my own life and having the introspection around kind of that and where my journey took me through loss and working through that and what I then wanted to kind of gain and get out of my life, helping people that were in a place of darkness and then working through that and then becoming um, kind of more into a different end of the spectrum to deal with mental health and then working through that into kind of what work-wise is formed today, which as you say are a couple of businesses. So I have psychotherapy and then I have a fitness and wellness brand as well. So I'm really working with kind of helping people elevate their lifestyle so it becomes something that they're it sounds sort of cliche, but living their best life. So how do they make fitness part of their identity and their lifestyle so that they don't feel like they're on a diet? So it's about, again, like we talk about finding the joy and and somewhat we call it the unglamorous grind. But what are the things that you can do? Are those miniature habits in terms of elite transformations that then transform your life so it becomes a lifestyle? Then you identify as a fit person or a person that prioritizes fitness within their lifestyle. And then the same thing with the mental health side of everything and the therapeutic side. It's about really, I feel very passionate about people elevating and becoming that best version of themselves, or the person or the version of themselves that's most aligned, most authentic, and also that has the most sovereignty and autonomy within themselves, and finding that voice. I think that's so significant.
I love that so much. So you bring up indirectly a really beautiful point about living, which is that when you elevate one part of your life, you elevate all parts of your life. And so
Mm-hmm.
you're really more of like a holistic kind of wellness person where it's not just like count your macros or calories in, calories out, and like this very to-do list way of doing things, or just like go to therapy and like do talk therapy and whatever. It's very much understanding how you operate and addressing the root cause issues in all areas, right? And that integration, I think, is really important because so many people who listen to this podcast are checklist people, which checklists are amazing. We love our
Yes.
checklists. But checklists can only get you so far before you have to start creating your own how-to guide to living your best life. And so I really appreciate that, you're like, oh, I started to get here by changing my own life and helping
Yeah.
people get through the darkness. So, if you don't mind going back to, so if you're transforming people's darkness into light, it's because you've been through some pretty tough stuff yourself. Do you mind sharing?
Yeah, some real heavy shit. I had very challenging upbringing, childhood in some respects, and then working through that, I was very lucky. I went to a really good school. Then I taught professionally as a dancer, which was amazing. And then at 25, my brother took his own life, and then 18 months later, my cousin took his own life. So there was so much trauma within a very short space of time, and then ironically, the like losing my brother, because it was very much I was in it, was very different to then experiencing what happened with my cousin. And actually that invoked more of a complex PTSD manifestation of kind of what happened. It was the same thing happening again in a very short space of time. So actually that sort of the experience of that was worsened by having a second big trauma, essentially. And that manifested with me with PTSD at the time, along with various other things. And so I think for me, it was really working through that understanding around anxiety, how that manifested, how I felt about that. And at the same time, I was then co-founding a charity. So obviously when something really bad happens, you feel like you want to help the community. He was very young. My brother was 18 when he took his own life. And so you're wanting to help kind of the people around him and feel supported. So I co-founded a charity which did amazing stuff with education and young people. But I was also struggling with my own personal experience with what happens when you lose two very close people, a sibling and a cousin, to suicide. And that's really what the foundation for me was, that cracking open of that and working through how do you navigate with having such, like, your core foundation is rocked, so everything is essentially stripped, and then you have to work out how do I feel about all sorts of things when the existence of self kind of has been completely shattered. So it was learning around that. I had, obviously, anybody that understands as well, really deep trauma, it kind of manifests in different ways. So bad gut health, like chronic eczema and things like that. So, and that's where that whole journey of the holisticness for me, it was working through. And it was, again, we talk about checklists, but it was a real trial and error of what helped and what didn't, and learning about chronic stress, how that impacts your entire system. And then for me, really learning to live a life that then helps me keep myself well and then keep other people well. And then in turn, that's developed into what I do today. I've had a really incredible experience of growing up. So again, I understand what it's like to be on stage. I understand that kind of institutionalized brain space and how to dial that up in terms of understanding adrenaline going on stage, how you modulate that in terms of going and doing that. I've also had, again, that example of being in a very extreme, stressful crisis situation and then helping people go through as a co-founding suicide prevention charity. Originally, it was me on the end of a crisis line. So again, it was working through that kind of high stakes, high stress period of time as well for me. And then coming out and developing what I do today is a dialed down version for me, in order for me to be able to live well and carry on helping and serving the people that I can serve today.
Oh man, that is such a wild ride. And thank you so much for sharing, because I know there are a lot of people who've been through similar things. And it's interesting because hearing you share that, it took me back to several folks that I know or have worked with who had the like trauma happen very in quick succession.
Yes. Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
and like the struggle of even getting to the diagnosis, right? Like there's something, it's not about the diagnosis, right? And obviously like mental and physical health is so different from person to person, but when you have language to understand what you're experiencing, it can really take a lot of the pressure off, right? Because you think
Mm-hmm.
there's something wrong with you. So out of curiosity, did you know that you had CPTSD when all that stuff happened with your brother and your cousin, or how long did it take for you to figure that out?
Not that long. So the series of events happened like very quickly after my cousin, and I realized I couldn't live like that. So there was a few things that I was like, so again, anything where you can't fight, basically with again complex PTSD or PTSD, your brain can't file the like traumatic situations. And there was a few things that happened within probably around a year, and I that would really trigger me. So missing phone calls, any type of phone call would really trigger me. Not knowing where people were, that would really trigger me. I couldn't relax unless I knew where people were. Yeah, if I missed phone calls, that would again elevate my entire system. I was in again state of panic. So there was a few things, and I remember I was away, and I remember missing a couple of phone calls and the assumption that I'd come to that somebody had died. And I remember having the introspection in that moment of going, I can't live like this anymore. If this is how it's going to feel, and I'm going to feel like this chronic state of stress every time, like a succession of phone calls I missed, I was like, I can't live like this. There is something wrong with me. For me, that was the kind of, that's where I got to that point where I was like, oh, I can't. But now in terms of introspection and understanding, I mean, that was 14 years ago. So, or like, yeah, around 14 years ago. So now having the understanding, there were so many other things that were building up. So like, as I said, like the eczema was there. I couldn't talk. So again, like food intolerances for me, I couldn't tolerate wheat. I'd immediately get like, again, like a cold sore or swollen lips and things like that. So now I would look at like anybody's stress state and look at kind of like, that's that underlying buzz of, there was so much going on in my system that my brain was trying to understand and process, and it was coming out in these different ways of expressing, which at the time I didn't have that understanding to be like, that's what you don't begin to notice until I got to this stage where I was like, this thing with the phone calls, I cannot live like this if this is what's going to happen every time I miss a phone call. Like this isn't healthy and it's not okay. And I remember coming back from this holiday and being like, I have to go and see someone. Like, I cannot live like this. And I did. And I was one of those people that was literally saw a therapist and was like, right, how quickly can I get this done? Like, how quickly can I move through this? Because I can't live like this. And they're like, you come in twice a week for an hour. Like, how's your support network? And then we just got on and did the work, which brought me out of kind of that, again, that hyper PTSD is like anxiety on speed. I really hope that nobody ever experiences it. But if they do, like, as well, I think it's important and it's only my example of it, but it's like, it feels like electricity. So if anyone has that feeling of like it's buzzing, silence isn't silence, it's like so charged. And I think, and like, you kind of want to crawl out of your own skin. Like, that's what I would say is how anxiety and that chronic state of anxiety felt to me. So if anybody else is experiencing those things, please go and get help and notice what's going on within your system. So that's
Yeah.
what I would
No,
say.
I appreciate that. And so you, at the time, were not a psychotherapist, right?
No,
Okay.
no, no, no.
So you just, it sounds like hit rock bottom and you're like, I don't know what living is, but this isn't it. And I can't do this anymore. And so, what was it that led you to therapy to begin with? Because a lot of people really struggle with going to a therapist, asking for help. Like they think that they need to handle it on their own. So, like, what had to happen in your brain for you to be like, I need external support?
That I didn't want to feel like I felt like that anymore. And I had to know that there was a different way to live. Like, I had to know that there was a different way to live because I had some real traumatic stuff going on. And I was like, if this is living, like, this isn't, I wouldn't say I was like suicidal, but I would say that I had the ideation of like, if this is what life is like, then I don't, like, I'm not sure I want to be
Mhm.
involved. And so that was that point where I was like, well, I haven't had any help yet. So therefore, let me go and explore that and let's see if this helps. So that's where I got to. I was so curt with the therapist and I was like, yeah, like, I want to, like, how do I get this done? I think as well, if you've been institutionalized growing up in terms of going to like I went to a dance school, so everything was very regimented, and even in that sense, you didn't show any pain, and all of that kind of stuff is very normalized. So even then, asking for help, I was like, this is a bit scary, and that was like that point for me where feelings were not spoken about, not talked about at home. And so for me, at 20, I was 26 at the time, and I was trying to do multiple jobs and all of that kind of thing, and getting to that stage and being like, yeah, no, I can't do this. Like, I can't live like this. And everything was super stressful. Like, it was, yeah, stressful's not even the word, but it was just awful. It was horrible. It was a horrible existence. And I was like, I don't want to live like this. There has to be another way to live. So yeah, met the therapist and I think I did 6 intense sessions with her, like twice a week. And she was incredible. And we did an amazing technique, which is called rewind technique, which I later went on to train to learn to do, because I was like, this is like literally changed my life. So I went on and learned how to do that technique in terms of therapeutically. And she was the one that turned around to me. And this is, like I said, this is very early on in my journey of life. So I really didn't think that any of this stuff was going to happen. I was like, I'm going to be on stage. And then I was, working with artists and performers. And that was what I thought was going to happen. And she said, you'd make an amazing therapist. And I was like, do you say that to everyone? I was just like, whatever. And and at the time I was like, nah, like, and she just said, yeah, if you ever wanted to train as a therapist, I would take you on. You'd be incredible as a therapist. And I was like, okay. So and then probably a few years later, I started the training, and that's because I was like, okay, like I'm ready to take that on, and I want to be able to help in that way. So that's where that kind of then kicked off.
Ah, that is so fascinating. And I can definitely relate to elements of your story of, I had to hit my own rock bottom in a couple of different ways. One was financially, like I got an eviction notice when I was in university, and I
Mm,
I was like, I come from a house of like not the greatest money management. And I was like, I don't know what financial success looks like, but I never want to feel this way again. Like whatever it takes, we're getting out of it.
yeah.
And also I knew by virtue of being a veteran and law enforcement and doing some of the cases that I did, I was like, surely I have some trauma. So I was
Mm,
in therapy, and my therapist like casually pointed out that the hypervigilance wasn't normal, and I was like, wait,
no.
what? Like my normal everyday state of scanning the room for threats is not what everybody else experiences. And she's like, no, honey. And I'm like, oh, okay. Like, so, so yeah, I'm super thankful for the awareness. And also, I loved what you said about like inherently your intuition was telling you something was wrong, right? Like whether it was your
Mm,
gut health or like your mental health or something else. But then I love that you said it was a process of trial and error to figure out what worked for you, because
yeah.
as a recovering perfectionist, we have a tendency to say, this is what achievement and success looks like. And if you
Yeah.
try something and you don't get there immediately, then it's like, well, it's a wash, like it's never going to happen, right? And so
Hmm.
many people, myself included, I have felt myself in that situation where it's like, didn't work, and then you give up. But the reality of giving yourself permission to explore and get curious about what works, and also the self-awareness to know you're going to be different from everybody else.
Yeah.
And so you have an obligation to figure out for yourself what does work and what doesn't work. And that error part isn't failure, it's just an opportunity to try again. And it's just, figuring out, okay, that doesn't work, then what does work, and process of
Hmm.
elimination type of thing. And I think it's really interesting too. One of the themes that we're talking about right now is this idea of the power of your mind in creating
Yeah.
your reality. So whether it's post-traumatic event or learning how to harness the buzz to get on stage and give the best performance of your life, the brain is ultimately the vessel that creates our reality, right? And
For
it
sure.
dictates our behaviors. So for you now compared to back then, How would you say you've been able to observe your brain shift in terms of its ability to thrive and create the life and career that you want?
I think it's having fundamentally it's having compassion to begin with. I think fundamentally having compassion with where you start out, as you say, like for me it's understanding I am going to be different to other people. And like I think as well, like when we're recovering perfectionists, I'm in recovery, you talk about like as well, like you're not necessarily on the same timeline as like society or things like that would describe that you are, but you also have to take into consideration and celebrate how far you've come, which is a completely different, or routinely is a different journey to lots of your peers, for example. There are amazing opportunities that I've had, as well as obviously horrific things that have happened that I really genuinely hope that nobody ever sees in their entire life, and that I had to confront and face, much like you have done it within the work that you've done. So I think that is fundamentally what I've understood as well. Like I feel sometimes, I would say for me, I had eczema growing up through my entire life, and looking at that as a holistic thing, it was like I realized that talking therapy actually, like it's gone. Like the eczema is gone. I struggled with it to the point that I nearly died from it when I was younger. I got like completely, I was very unwell with having like really bad skin to the point where it was quite, again, was really dramatic and traumatic. And having the talking therapy, since then I have never had eczema again. So again, it's that whole point about you need to express. That was for me, was how my body was expressing that I was not talking and not expressing myself. It was coming out in my skin. And so that's something that I've learned, that I really need to talk about things. And some people might say talking therapy is not the answer, and that's cool too, but it's, again, it's understanding that you need to be able to express what you do. So we start with compassion for the mind, and also I think your ability to be able to harness and negotiate with your mind is super important. So I would say it's the same thing, like around understanding we can be compassionate and we can love ourselves, and we can, but we also have to understand that some days this is a requirement and some days something else is a requirement, and understanding that sometimes we need to be disciplined in, and we need to be disciplined in the way that we think about ourselves. I think our brains can run the show, and if it's a negative and we're thinking shitty thoughts, like the expectation that then we're going to show up as somebody that's not feeling shit about ourselves is not cool. So that's where I think you have to be really disciplined around recognizing a thought and then being like, right, does that serve me, does that help me, does that make me feel good about myself, or shit? And that's where that discipline comes in terms of like understanding around why is my thought pattern this way, and how do I begin to adapt that in a dialogue so it sounds a little bit more kind, or begin to talk about it in a different way. You always talk about giving it another voice, like, so again, and having, I think you can be disciplined, but you can also find the fun in it. And so that's, for me, that's the significance, is working through that and understanding and helping people, educating people around, like, it can be fun, but we also have to, I think, reparent ourselves in that sense of being, of knowing that, like, okay, we know this is not helpful. How do we find something that feels joyful, easier to do, but is also serving us in a way that is like, that's moving me towards whatever goal I'm moving towards and striving towards.
Yeah,
So,
totally. I love that so much for so many reasons. You talked about the joy of the journey, right? So it's interesting because you started by talking about this like horrific trauma you experienced when you were younger. And then it's like, I call it digging yourself out of the pit, right? So all you see around you is darkness and destruction and death and sadness, and it's awful. And then, like, you paired with a therapist to help you get out of that pit. And then the journey continues to be about, okay, well, how am I actually supposed to live my life on my terms? And how do I
mm,
address the things that are coming up for me? And it's interesting how your body is a great indicator of what's happening. And for those who are listening and not seeing the video cast, like her skin is luminous, you guys. Like,
Thank you.
and so, and I talk to people about joy and thriving as well, because the idea of life is just a grind and I'm just here to like work and kind of suffer and be a martyr and die is ingrained in us to a certain degree, especially if you come from a high achieving household where, again,
Hmm.
like your parents can be really well intended, right? Like, if I operate under the belief that like people do the best that they can with the resources they have, right?
Hmm.
Um, but then when you get to a point of figuring out like, oh, I actually need to maybe burn this whole system down and from the ashes build something that better serves me. And it's funny, when I talk to clients about this stuff, I'm like, if it's not fun, I don't want to do it. Like literally every client I have is it is a joyful, amazing partnership. I still have pinch me moments every session where I'm like, I can't believe I get to do this amazing work with this amazing human and get them to a place where like they can see what I see. And
Yeah.
speaking of which, it's funny because you talked about celebrating. You're like, oh yeah, celebrating how far the client has come. And I'm like giving you side eye a little bit because, and I want to bring this up because when you are a high achiever, it is so difficult for you to see and celebrate
Mm.
yourself because, especially as someone who's very service oriented, we're taught that it's all about everybody else and that receiving any amount of goodness or celebration or positive feedback about ourselves is like not good for whatever reason. And I think this is the importance of, especially initially, partnering with someone who can celebrate you in the absence of you being able to celebrate yourself, right? So, in terms of where you are right now with celebrating yourself, how would you say you've progressed in that journey?
It's a work in progress. With I'm still learning. And I think that's that point is give yourself permission to learn and learning to. I really think you have to dial in, and especially being English, we do not toot our own horns, and I think or trumpets. And I think that's really how you begin to start like recognizing that. And I think as well, like if you're internal, like I think if you're internally motivated, which I definitely am rather than externally motivated, I push myself, but then also I don't necessarily, and then I'm like, right, carry on back to it. Let's not celebrate it. And I think that sometimes you have to learn, actually, I need to be able to listen to those external sources for feedback. And often, as you say, like sometimes feedback's critical or you have to learn to have the resilience around it. But then sometimes, and in order to have the resilience and the internal push to move forward, sometimes you have to not listen to those voices. But then you also have to get to a point where you need to understand that actually those voices are important when they're celebrating you. So there's this fine line and this learning around, okay, yeah, feedback, and again for me feedback from clients that is really beautiful. That's something that to me I'm like, that's has really helped me celebrate myself, and I will read those things in that moment when I'm kind of again mentally being like being harsh or critical or being again not really seeing how far I've come in my journey. I'm like, okay, well, that helps. That's an element of that. And also telling your, like, I think telling your story, even telling your story to yourself, sometimes you have to think, these are all the things I've been through and I'm still here. Like, that's pretty freaking good. And I'm still trying to help people, not hurt people, and all of those kind of things. And that's worth celebrating on a granular level. And I think it's so in terms of like stripping that down as well, um, then building back up on that really slowly.
Yeah, oh, that's so good. I was thinking about a conversation we had a while ago where it
Oh
kind of was
gosh.
like, I define success as like, I'm not a shitty human. Like, that's winning. It's like the first step of like, maybe I don't see the success in myself, but I'm not a shitty human. I
Yeah.
care deeply about people, and that's a beautiful starting point. And so if somebody listening has to start there with, I'm still here. I'm in survival mode, but I'm a good human deep down. Like, you know it and I know it, right?
Yes, there's a quote that I'm gonna quote. If you never heal from what hurt you, you'll bleed on the people who didn't cut you.
Mm. Yes.
Mm.
Yes.
Look at
So
your face.
because it's so good and it's so true. And the wild part is that what you're talking about is most of the time people don't understand that they're bleeding out on other folks.
No. So for me, that's what's really important is having the introspection to know that like I have done as much as I can as me now, being an adult, and that it's an ongoing thing, right? Like, but to be mindful enough to be like, am I bleeding on the people that like that didn't cut me? And if that's foundationally where people start from, that's a good start
Oh, so
in
good.
in my
Yeah,
humble warrior opinion.
for sure. So speaking of, we're talking a little bit about like internal motivations, right? You mentioned. So now you're pointing to life purpose and what success looks like for you. So do you know what your life purpose is?
Do I know? I think I do. People, I think there's elements of I feel like I help people feel seen. I think that that's elements of my life purpose is to help people feel seen, help people feel like they matter, and help people feel like there's a worthiness piece of work in there somewhere that but for me I think that's very much like I have always been people always like you're a mirror or you're easy to talk to or some of that kind of stuff. So for me I think a lot like there's always been that ability to either help people feel seen, people feel heard. So I think that's some of my life purposes
Yes.
is yeah, is in there.
That's really beautiful. And so, as you know, the core of my business is the concept that your greatest strength comes from your greatest weakness. And so,
Mm.
was there ever a time in your life when you didn't feel seen and you had a hard time getting on stage or that you didn't matter?
Yeah, for sure. I think growing up, I didn't necessarily feel seen. I think I was a theatre kid because that was a point where I could put myself in a position where I was seen. I think that there is a lot with people being on stage and understanding that it's like that's where I will be seen. There's not an option to not be seen in that moment. So I think that when we look at some of the understanding around the people that step on stage, that you could relate that back to not being seen or feeling
Yeah,
invisible growing up. There is, and I can't remember who it is that I think that there is somebody that says, "Do you know what? If you've raised children really well, they don't want to go on stage. They have no desire to be famous." And I can't remember who it is, but there's somebody that's talked about like, yeah, if you've done a good job of parenting, they don't want to be on stage because they have no desire to be seen.
that is so good. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
So, so it's interesting, like, what was your journey to theater like? Was it you wanted to do that and you got on stage, or did somebody encourage you to get on stage as a
My
child?
grandmother, yes, my grandma was a ballerina. So she was a ballerina, but she was very famous back in her day. And then so growing up, I was encouraged to dance, and then was good at it. And so continued on, did the kind of the musical theatre stuff, and then danced, and then moved into music management, artist liaison kind of thing. So it's always been around that world and encouraging other people within that world as well.
That is
So
so
yeah,
interesting. Do you have any other theater related professionals in your family?
my brother was he played guitar, so he was
Okay.
on stage. He was phenomenal in terms of what his talent. He was very gifted, and that's I think what he would have done
Yeah.
if he was
Oh
with us today.
man. Oh my goodness. So I have a little bit of a theory, right? It's not every family, but I kind of feel like generationally, each family has their kind of coat of arms, like thing that they do. And I was thinking about this over the weekend because my family, we all come from like military, law enforcement, like some kind of protector background.
Mm.
And so it's interesting to hear that we're talking about being seen and getting on stage, and you have this like grandma who was an incredible
Mm.
performer, and then your brother, and like, so I'm curious when it comes to as a family weaving that thread of performance and getting on stage. What do you think your family, I don't know if it was like a family crest or a family motto, like what was the gift that your family was offering through the performances to the world?
Whoa, that's an interesting question.
It's
What do you think
deep,
we were offering?
right?
It was really deep. I think, yeah, what was that offering to the world? To outwardly, I think they were very gifted, talented people to say, here's what I can do, and I'm really good at doing it, which was amazing. I think internally, if you looked at that from the other, if you flipped to the stage person, it was this drive and this desire to be seen authentically, I think.
Oh, yeah, that is so beautiful. So, like, the idea of, first of all, recognizing your gifts and then
Mm.
offering your gifts to the world, right? So,
Mm.
whether it's like guitar or dancing or whatever it might be, it's, hey, this is a gift I've been given and I have a responsibility to steward it. And so I'm going to be seen as I am. I'm going to exist through my art. And that will translate to the audience, right? So it doesn't sound like there really was much attachment to the outcome. It's kind of like you just offer your gift, and then as people receive it as they receive it.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because I've heard performers talk over the years about, maybe it's like I want to help people escape from the reality, right? Like you go to a show to like escape and just immerse yourself in beauty or music or, whatever it might be. But I love the fact that for you, the awareness was more just this was my gift and I'm going to shine, right? That's
Yeah.
been passed down. And I think it's interesting considering what you've struggled with in terms of hiding and not fully showing up because maybe the environment wasn't the safest for a while.
Yeah.
And so, henceforth, proving the point, that thing that was a detriment has now become the springboard for the important work that you do, right? In terms of
Mm.
helping to heal people so they can step on their own stage and feel seen and reflecting back the best, truest version of themselves, right? And also letting people know that even if it's just you and I sitting talking, like you matter,
Mm.
right? You matter to me. And if that fills your cup so that you can go out and do the work that you were meant to do, like I'm just over here existing as I am.
Yeah.
I'm curious, how does that feel being reflected back to you?
It's good. It feels really good. I think there's a piece of like emotion in there when I think about like I think as well like performance there's an expression of emotion, like they are moving energy in motion. I think definitely as a dancer like you are expressing internally and then bringing it out. And I think as well like the way my brother played, it was there was like an essence of his soul that came through that, and that for me is how he would express himself. And I think that's something for me that's important. Other people, like if they do it through comedy or through, again it's their expressions of like, I love obviously stand up, we've spoken about Taylor, and it's like her way, that's her way of talking about her trauma. Like she stands up and talks about it on Netflix, and it like she went through a horrendous time and her mum died and she's like, but I'm on Netflix, and you're like, wow. Like, and it's just, when you're like, that's her way of expressing something. It's beautiful and it's authentic and it's her way of expressing emotions. And
Mm,
I think that's significant.
yes. And for the audience member who wants to go check out Taylor, which Taylor are you talking about?
Tomlinson, she's an American. Yeah, she's one of you guys. She's incredible. She's very funny. Female stand up.
Yes, we will put a link to Taylor's work in the show notes if anybody wants to access that. So, okay, this is really fascinating because we've talked about performance being energy and emotion, kind of like in motion, right? And you're expressing
Mm-hmm.
internally and bringing it out. And it's interesting because my own relationship with art has really evolved. Like, I remember being younger, going to art museums and kind of being like, are you serious? Like, my 5-year-old niece could have made that, right?
Yeah.
And now, that I have this picture. I realized I didn't know I was doing it, but there's a sculpture called Victory at Samothrace in the Louvre that it was the first time when I saw art that I was like, oh, I get it.
Did you feel it?
Oh, I totally felt it. Like I literally was like, can I just have a chair and sit here all day and just stare
Yeah.
at her? And I have printouts of her everywhere, like as bookmarks and like in my office and because there's something about her and it's wild when I think about it. I'm like, she was done in the before Christ era and I have a connection to an artist that I don't even know, and that is just so wild. Or even there's a song, my friend and I were at dinner the other day, and this song came over at the restaurant, and I just wanted to cry because it was
Mm,
so beautifully performed. And I was like, I have to go find that because I think, especially as high achievers, you focus so much on like how the world defines success
yeah.
rather than figuring out what that looks like for you. And as a result of that, you suppress a lot of parts of yourself that really need to be unleashed. And so I think now we're talking about environment, right? So environment plays a really important part in living the life of joy and thriving that you're offering people. So, when we talk about what it's like when you're in an unhealthy environment that you can't fully express yourself, what did that look like for you? And did you even realize you were in an unhealthy environment?
Did I? Yes, I think my body understood it. And again, when you begin to holistically look and you read things like the body keeps a score, you begin to like it expresses itself in a way that you're like, I am not thriving. And you feel you do, or I, it's that there's an undercurrent of dirge. Like that's like I don't feel like that best version of myself, and there's this disconnect that I think feels in there, and I think that you're trying to, or it feels like you're trying to make something fit, but it's never going to fit. And I think that's kind of that feeling within that. Yeah, there's an undercurrent of unrest that if we really listen to it, it's there. But we're also there's so much fear around hearing that undercurrent, right? Because that undercurrent generally means that we gonna need to make change,
Right.
which
Totally. Oh,
which scares people.
no, I mean, for sure, because oftentimes it requires that you overhaul significant parts of your life or maybe your entire life.
Mm-hmm.
And what you're offering is you can either stay where you are, and the benefit of that is you know how to survive in that space,
Yeah, yeah,
but you know you're not thriving, you know you're not living. And so the cost of being able to move to thriving is you have to change a lot of patterns that have benefited other people and maybe even benefited you in an unhealthy way, right?
yeah.
But I love that definitely in hindsight, you're like, oh no, I knew something was off.
Oh,
I
I
knew.
knew.
So, what was kind of the first key step you had to take to step out of that unhealthy environment and tell yourself that you mattered enough to do that?
To believe that you're worthy enough to make that change, that you are capable enough as well. I think that so many things are you don't believe that you are capable enough to make the change. And I think that that's again a whole piece of work around developing the self-talk around you are capable of doing this, and it might not be perfect, like permission for it to be messy and then take one foot in front of the other if that change is something that you truly desire. Yeah, you I do believe that people can do anything.
Yeah. Well, and what's funny is that the clients that I work with are such high achievers that as soon as I'm like, but you did this, this, and this for other people, like you did the impossible, they're like, yeah, I did. I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
so, so you did it for everybody else. Like now we're talking about doing that for yourself,
Yeah.
right? Like you have a track record of success. So why do you think it's not going to apply to you? Yeah. So speaking of success, how do you define success today?
How do I think I talk about like peacefully thriving. I think that's something that for me resonates and that feels like it's authentic. So yeah, it sounds a bit like crass, like authentic, peacefully thriving. But to me, that means being able to have the time and space to do the things that I know are really good for me. So for me, being outside like, again, being able to exercise for me is something that I know helps me feel like the best version of myself, helps me, again, be able to process the things that I need to process, to be able to show up with all the people and serve the people that I work with. I need to, again, like, that's that whole pouring from an empty cup. So for me, I've curated a lifestyle that means that I do that before I do anything else in my day, for example.
Mm.
So for me, exercise first thing in the morning is integral. And so I feel like I've achieved something for me, therefore I can give from a place of fullness rather than emptiness. I've never been one of those people to kind of like roll out of bed and then start 5 minutes before work. Because I just, to me, that makes me feel like, again, I've not really seen myself before I then go and see others, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So that to me is hugely important. Again, ensuring that, like, having the awareness, introspection, the space to check in with myself, to make sure that, like, I've kept everything like as well as I can. So yeah, having that introspection around making sure that my environment's serving me rather than it not serving me. And I
That-
think sometimes when we're off balance, that's when we begin to that's when that happens. Like, we can be, if we're off balance or if something throws us off balance, that's when you begin to get that confusion. So for me, around having clarity, having the space to have clarity is super important.
That's so interesting. So being outside, exercise, like the ability to process stuff. You said peacefully thriving, which you kind of couched it a little bit, right? You're like, oh, I know, it's just like kind of cheesy or whatever. But the reality is that success, true success, across everybody I've talked to, isn't a loud, flashy thing. It really is the, for lack of a better term, boringness of
Mm,
peace, right? It's contentedness. It's knowing that you're super proud of taking the courageous step to create something that previously wasn't modeled for you. It's the courage and healing, right?
mm,
And so as soon as you recognize and let go of what the world says success looks like and step into, actually, success for me is peacefully thriving. I know success for me is, well, my husband and I were talking about this. We were like, it's so much fun just hanging out on a Saturday and weeding and cutting the lawn. Like, it is the happiest of places. It's very meditative for us. And frankly, I mean, there's a lot that goes into that. It's the gratitude that we are in a place that we worked really hard for so
yeah.
that we don't have to work all day Saturday. We can mow the lawn, and there's so much gratitude in that whole process, but it's
Mm.
quiet. And so many people think that's unsexy, but I'm like, oh, give me peaceful thriving all day. Like, you can keep the loud stuff for yourself, man. I can't with that anymore. But I love that. Oh my goodness. I could literally spend hours talking to you about this stuff, but I want to be respectful of your time. So Lottie, we've had such a beautiful conversation about that messy middle of, you're born and you're given this lifestyle or these beliefs, and then trauma happens, and you have to figure out at this crossroads of, am I going to continue or am I going to completely change things up and realign myself with who I was always meant to be? And for you, it's getting on stage and helping other people get on stage and just be, right? Like,
Mm.
just offer your gift to the world, shine brightly, and the joy and the success and that peaceful thriving is going to come. Are there any last kind of thoughts you want to share with the audience?
I think it's around learning, and it's probably a Brené Brown about the courage. I think there's a book she's writes about maybe the courage to be disliked, but I also think it's about the courage be yourself. I think that's what's significant. I think it's finding, yeah, the courage to be yourself in a
Ugh,
world that doesn't want you to, that doesn't thrive, that doesn't, that I think the more people become themselves, the less people benefit off that.
100%. So it's interesting you say that because as someone who has been to war, I've been shot at, I've been bombed, like all the things. People often talk about courage in that context of like, oh my gosh, you were so courageous and you went to war and you did these things. The courage to be yourself is way scarier than the courage of facing bullets and bombs. I'm here to tell you that without a doubt. And it's not just me. Across my veteran community, we've talked about this. It's defining success on your terms is the most courageous thing you can ever do. Lottie, I know people are going to want to connect with you, and you can hire Lottie as your psychotherapist to help you get on stage. So, where can people find you?
I'm under the Self-Esteem Queen on Instagram or Elite Transformations as well, or Elite dot Transformations, I think. So,
Yes. We will put both of those in the show notes so people can connect with you. DM her if you want to hire her for coaching or psychotherapy services. She is phenomenal at what she does, you guys.
yeah.
Thank you so much for being with us, Lottie. This has been such an honor, and I'm so thankful I get to share you with the world because you are truly exceptional, and it's been my honor. It's honestly been a real joy to get to know you and just witness your stories. So, guys, if you are looking for more resources like figuring out what your life purpose is, check out my life purpose exercise freebie on my website, mightysparrowcoaching.com. There's video prompts to help guide you, or you can check out my best-selling book, The Least of Us: How Your Imposter Syndrome Points to Your Greatest Power. Until next time, humble warriors, please remember the world needs who you were made to be. Thank you for joining us today on this journey to discover how you can harness your inner imposter to work for you. If you enjoyed this episode and would like some help overcoming your imposter syndrome, check out the free life purpose exercise on my website and subscribe to my blog. If you already know what your life purpose is and are ready to crush or harness your imposter syndrome, then you're going to love my best-selling book, The Least of Us: How Your Weakness Points to Your Greatest Power, available on Amazon and all major book retailers. Or you can hit me up at alani@mightysparrowcoaching.com to discuss private coaching or corporate and government training. That's ALANI@mightysparrowcoaching.com. Listen, there's only ever been one you, and there will only ever be one you. And you have a specific gift to give that the world desperately needs. Don't let your self-doubt be the thing preventing you from living your most joyful and impactful life. Until next time, I'm always cheering you on.